The United Nations appeals again for calm as the death toll mounts in Sudan.
The Kremlin releases images claiming to show Russian President Vladimir Putin visiting the headquarters of Russian troops fighting in Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky warns world leaders that delays in supplying weapons to Ukraine are costing lives as fighting in the east rages on.
At least 185 people have been killed and more than 1,800 injured in 3 days of fighting in Sudan, according to the United Nations. Both the Sudanese army and its former allies, the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, claim to be in control of key sites in the capital Khartoum, but that hasn't been independently verified. On Monday, the EU's ambassador to Sudan, Aidan O'Hara, was attacked in his home in Khartoum. The Irish diplomat was not seriously hurt, but the incident was swiftly condemned by Brussels. Government forces say they've reclaimed the eastern city of Port Sudan, but fighting continues in Darfur, where the RSF is strong. The UN Secretary-General appealed again for calm.
I strongly condemn the outbreak of fighting that is taking place in Sudan and appeal to the leaders of the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces to immediately cease hostilities, restore calm, and begin a dialogue to resolve the crisis. The situation has already led to horrendous loss of life, including many civilians.
The World Health Organization says many hospitals are struggling to cope, reporting shortages of blood and medical supplies. The fighting broke out on Saturday after disagreements between the leaders of the armed forces and the RSF over the planned integration of the paramilitary group into the regular army.
Demonstrators in Paris took to the streets again on Monday evening after President Emmanuel Macron delivered a televised address to the nation, defending his controversial and unpopular plan to raise the retirement age to 64. Macron said he heard the people's anger, but insisted that it was the only way to guarantee everyone's pension.
Ces changements étaient nécessaires pour garantir la retraite de chacun et pour produire plus de richesses pour notre nation. La réponse ne pouvait pas être de baisser les pensions. Elle ne pouvait pas être non plus d'augmenter les cotisations de ceux qui travaillent. Et elle ne pouvait pas être, comme je l'ai beaucoup entendu, de ne rien faire. Car c'était alors laisser les déficits s'accumuler et notre dette augmenter pour les générations futures.
He said the door remains open for unions, which have already turned down an invitation to meet with him on Tuesday. He also announced upcoming negotiations about key issues like improving employees' income and improving working conditions. Macron hopes his proposals will help the country move away from the period of protests and strikes over the retirement age that threatens the ambitions of his remaining 4 years in power.
The Kremlin has released images which it says shows Russian President Vladimir Putin visiting the headquarters of Russian troops fighting in Ukraine. The footage appears to show Putin visiting the command post for Russian forces in the southern Kherson region before receiving reports from top military officials. Russia's leader later visited the headquarters of the Russian National Guard in the Luhansk region to hear updates about the situation there.
Мне важно услышать ваше мнение о том, как складывается обстановка, послушать вас, обменяться информацией.
Moscow illegally annexed the regions of Kherson, Luhansk, Donetsk and Zaporizhia last September in a move that was strongly condemned by Kiev and its allies. The sound of rocket fire fills the air in the Donetsk region, the scene of the longest and bloodiest battle since the war began, as Russian and Ukrainian forces continue to fight tooth and nail for every inch of land. In his nightly address, Ukraine's president warned world leaders that delays in supplying his country with more weapons are costing lives.
Щоразу, коли ми чуємо, що обіцяне постачання зброї затримується, щоразу, коли виникають сумніви щодо типу зброї для України, щодо далекобійності або інших якісних характеристик, щоразу це означає, що українські воїни віддають своє життя, що був цей час.
Recent images purporting to show the frontline city of Bakhmut give some insight into the extent of the devastation. But on his visit to Brazil's capital on Monday, Russia's foreign minister said Moscow wants the war to end as soon as possible.
Понятно, что мы заинтересованы в том, чтобы украинский конфликт как можно скорее завершился. И те цели, которые мы преследуем в этой связи, они заключаются прежде всего в том, чтобы гарантировать отсутствие на территории Украины каких-либо угроз военной безопасности Российской Федерации.
Russia's defense ministry claims the Wagner mercenary group has made further gains in Bakhmut over recent days. Should Moscow seize the city, it would open the door to major Ukrainian-held towns in the region, such as Slovyansk and Kramatorsk. G7 countries reiterated their support for Ukraine and issued warnings to Russia, China and Sudan on the final day of meetings between the group's top diplomats in Japan. In the final statement on Tuesday, Japan's foreign minister expressed concern that the crisis in Ukraine could be repeated in Southeast Asia.
ロシアによる無責任な核のレトリックやベラルーシに核兵器を配備するという威嚇、これを受け入れられないことを確認をいたしました。さらに、制裁回避や第三国等からのロシアへの武器提供に対処するための連携強化で一致をいたしました。
In his closing statement, the US Secretary of State revealed that he had called for a ceasefire from the two warring generals in Sudan after an American motorcade was attacked.
We had an American diplomatic convoy that was fired on. All of our people are safe and unharmed. But this action was reckless, it was irresponsible, and of course unsafe.
Good evening, everyone. I do confirm.
On the sidelines of the G7 meeting, Antony Blinken met with his French counterpart to reaffirm the strength of the US-French alliance. China has responded to the talks by accusing the G7 of malicious slander.
Outrageously harsh. That's what the European Union has called the persecution of Russian opposition figure Vladimir Kara-Murza, who has been sentenced to 25 years in prison. The United States has backed the call, with both parties considering the case to be politically motivated.
This is unacceptable. This is yet another demonstration by Russian authorities of the political misuse of judiciary in order to pressure activists, human rights defenders and any voices opposing Russia's illegal aggression against Ukraine. This so-called trial, apart from being politically motivated, also did not meet the international standards when it comes to fair and public hearing by a competent, impartial and independent tribunal.
Kara-Murza is one of the most known critics of the Kremlin. The Russian-British former journalist and politician was accused of treason, disseminating fake news about Moscow's army and the managing of a so-called unwanted organization. Other charges are based on his criticism of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and accusations of war crimes. Kara-Murza denies all accusations. He is the latest of several Putin opponents to have been arrested or forced to flee Russia.
Influential Tunisian Islamist leader Rached Ghannouchi was detained Monday after a police search in his home. The move was denounced by his supporters as a politically driven effort by the president to quash Tunisia's opposition. Ghannouchi, head of the Ennahda party, is the most prominent critic of Tunisian President Kais Saied. While the reason for his detention has not been revealed, the arrest comes amid growing social tensions and deepening economic troubles in Tunisia.
Italian authorities have seized around 2 tons of cocaine worth more than €400 million, floating at sea off Sicily's eastern coast. The country's tax and customs police have called it a record haul. The drugs were stored and sealed in 70 waterproof packages, held together by fishing nets and equipped with a luminous signalling device. Police said the peculiar packaging method suggests it was likely dumped at sea by a cargo ship to be recovered later on. The UN's Office on Drugs and Crime says global cocaine production is at its highest level on record.
The Vatican is in the spotlight again. Tensions are at fever pitch after Pietro Orlandi, the brother of Emanuela who disappeared in 1983, suggested that John Paul II used to leave his papal apartments at night and, to quote, certainly was not to bless houses. This after an alleged gangster claimed girls were brought into the Vatican to be molested.
Rivolgo un pensiero grato alla memoria di San Giovanni Paolo II, in questi giorni oggetto di illazioni offensive e infondate.
It's a new twist in the mysterious disappearance of Emanuela Orlandi, the subject of the Netflix documentary series The Vatican Girl. For many, including Pietro, the Church is behind her disappearance. The Holy See has reopened the investigation into what some say was a kidnapping, but a motive has never been determined.
Per sicurezza, così almeno c'era. Io ho potuto verbalizzare tutto quello che avrei voluto verbalizzare, tutte le cose di cui ho detto questi giorni in televisione, no? Parlando degli argomenti legati alla famosa trattativa, a quei documenti che ho in mano riguardo la questione di Londra, quindi il trasferimento di Emanuele a Londra, le questioni riguardanti la pedofilia e gli altissimi prelati che potrebbero essere legati alla questione della pedofilia.
The disappearance was linked to several investigations, including an assassination attempt behind John Paul II in 1981. Other theories consider that Emanuela could have been the victim of a paedophile ring or a mafia gang.